Hey, good afternoon, friends. Today is Monday, August the 19th, 2024, and the time now is 12:57 p.m. So, today I want to talk briefly about the situation in Gaza, and this video or program or talk, however you want to say it, was supposed to be episode 9 of the playlist series, Trends and Headlines in Geopolitics. However, when I created the thumbnail for the video, I forgot to include the abbreviation TAHI and geopolitics, which basically stands for Trends and Headlines in Geopolitics. So as a result, this video or program or talk, once again, however you want to say it, is going to be instead the first video for the playlist series, Gaza. As I said many times, there are countless playlists on this channel. For example, each country in the world will have at least 2 playlists. One will be the country's name and the other the country's name. The country's name playlist will feature videos or programs or talks pertains to the country's position in geopolitics, how the country does relate to other countries in its region and around the world. And then the country playlist will feature videos or programs or talk that pertains to the domestic situation in the country. Now, I am going to start this brief talk. However, before I do, I want to first thank you for being a member of the Echoing Voice community and also for watching the Echoing Voice. Now, if you haven't done so, please subscribe to this channel, support the purpose and the content of this channel, and also please share the video of this channel, share the link of the channel to your friends and your families. Thank you very much. Today, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to read the description for this program, which can also serve as a conclusion or a summary of the program. And then I'm going to address the individual points or questions that I include in the program, video, or talk, however you want to say it. So now I am going to read. For the title of this video or talk or program, it is GAZA Cries. The world sees and hears, but is too weak and powerless to do anything. How did we get here? How do we end this? And what are the consequences? As much as we are taught ever-expanding theories and aggressively drilled with scenarios about freedom, justice, and equality, the truth is that power, might, and prestige are the only things that matters in international relations. This is why the powerless are persecuted and the powerful are allowed to go on living their hypocritical lives as if they have committed no violation against the world, especially the part of humanity known as the Global South. Take into consideration also that those who commit crimes in Iraq, Libya, and elsewhere, or who chair the commission of crimes, are now calling for the head of Vladimir Putin. In the eyes of the world today, the West continues to look like a hypocrite and, to some, the enabler of the misfortunes of the Global South. So far, nearly 40,000 people have died in Gaza, and there are estimates that the total number of direct and indirect deaths could be over 100,000. Also, it is said that about 21 people, including 6 children, were killed by an Israeli airstrike on Sunday alone. In the past 2 days, one family lost 18 members to an Israeli strike. As the carnage continues and the echoes cause strife in our international community, the fate of one man, Mohammed Abuel-Qomasan, has made him become the image and headline of the sadness, pain, and the resentment that Gaza has become for the world. Or perhaps Gaza is a stain in our human consciousness. Mr. Abuel-Qomasan lost his wife and 4-year-old twin babies to shelling as he went to the hospital to register their births and collect the certificate. The strike that killed his wife and babies is said to have also killed the maternal grandmother and 2 other people. What is happening in Gaza, the Middle East, must stop not only because it is causing senseless loss of lives, but because in the long run, it could lead to devastating consequences for Israel, the greater Middle East, and the world. Since the outbreak of the current crisis in the Middle East, there have been countless allegations of discontent from Muslims throughout the world that the situation in Gaza continues due to the collaboration or the reluctance of prominent Muslim nations in the region and in the world to act. Whether these allegations are warranted or can be substantiated, the situation in the Middle East is of great global concern. Who knows what level of radicalism this war in Gaza could ignite in the future? Questions or comments? Number 1, what does this war in Gaza say about the West? Number 2, recently, the West has been apologizing to Africa and others for its past violations. The transatlantic slave trade, or slavery, colonialism, endless wars, and all other forms of brutality relating to Western dominance and aggression against the people of the world. Given what is happening in Gaza, in Ukraine, and what could be happening in East Asia, should the rest of humanity, that is, the global South, believe that the West is sorry for its aggression, or should it even accept the apology? Number 3, the situation in Gaza further illustrates the divide in international relations and the significance of power, might, and prestige in achieving defined objectives. It begs the question of whether the survival of the global South depends on its ability and willingness to be radical and to arm itself. Should the global South challenge the West in all things for its survival, and why? Today, it is evident that justice can only be served unto the weak and powerless, while the strong and powerful can sit tight and enjoy their lives. Number 5, what are Israel, the United States, and the West Gaza objectives? Are they anticipating and ready for the long-term consequences? Also, are they ready or willing to accept responsibility for the eventual and long-term consequences of their actions? Or will they do the obvious, privatize the glory of their misdeeds, and socialize and globalize the devastating consequences? I'm going to read that statement or that question again. What are Israel, the United States, and West Gaza objectives? Are they anticipating and ready for the long-term consequences? Also, are they ready or willing to accept responsibility for the eventual and long-term consequences of their action? Or will they do the obvious, privatize the glory of their misdeeds, and socialize and globalize the devastating consequences? Number 6, who is advising or making Israel, the United States, or West Gaza decision? And are they thinking this thoroughly? Number 7, Does the continuation of the war in Gaza and the short and long-term consequences help or save Israel or the Gazans in any way? And if so, how and why? So friends, these are the questions. And also, before that, the brief summary of the description of this video, program, or talk, however you want to say it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to review the various questions or comments and just give my opinion on the situation. And then I hope to hear what you think. Thank you. So now I chose the title, okay, GAZA Cries, because we are seeing what is coming out of Gaza, the images of people crying because of the large scale of bombardment that are going on, and also the large scale of death and destruction that are going on in Gaza every day. And also the subtitle, which is "The World Sees and Hears, but is too weak and powerless to do anything." And I also add 3 questions, and they are: number 1, how did we get here? Number 2, how do we end this? And number 3, what are the consequences in terms of long-term consequences and short-term consequences? Of course, we can go back to October 7, 2023. And also, many will argue that it goes back 75 years ago. And there are those who will argue much further that it goes back to the 1800s. However, for the situation in terms of where it stands, it is exposing a lot of things about the world today. In the world, especially by the West, we are bombarded every day about the whole idea of freedom, justice, equality. What is happening in Gaza, as I stated in the description, demonstrate division in global politics, the fact that power, prestige, and might makes the difference. You can scream freedom, justice, equality, exception, tolerance, and all that good stuff. But if you are weak, you are persecuted. And if you are powerful, you are free. And this is why we are seeing the situation going on. And it is also the case when we look at the past in terms of what happened in Iraq, Libya, and other places around the world, where Western countries go and bomb the hell out of the people and make large-scale destruction. And Western leaders are getting away with it. But then African leaders and leaders of the global South, they get persecuted. But also the situation in Gaza, as much as the situation in Ukraine, teaches us, or they teach us together, that what is coming out of the West is nothing but hypocrisy, where it is also showing where the global South stands in terms of global politics. Now, for the situation in Ukraine, when it started, even though many countries were reluctant to just come out boldly and just immediately condemn Russia, Russia was condemned in various ways. But then we started hearing sentiments such as save and protect Ukraine or Ukrainians because they have white people with blonde hair and blue eyes. We saw that called by Europeans to protect, to preserve Ukraine, and it basically prompted questions in the global South. What about the people of Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and the victims of all the large-scale destruction, the aggression of the West? The position of Ukraine and the fact that Ukraine did not immediately try to seek the protection or the support of the global South and stayed with the West, it basically drew a line that Ukraine is the West, and what we are seeing in Russia is just a Western aggression, or the West carrying out their war however they want, however they see fit, and do not care about the rest of the world, the global South. Now, in terms of the situation in the Middle East, both Israel and Gaza or Palestinian can claim member of the global South. that they are members of the global south. But it is beginning to look as if Israel is the global west, the global north, the white west, and the Palestinians or Gaza is shaping to look like members of the global south. In this case, it is also triggering the past, the global south's past experiences where Western countries went to the global south and just bombard the hell out of the global south and mistreat people, basically aggressively dealt with the people of the global south. For Israel, I think it is a grave mistake where it is beginning to look like a member of the West and that it is not part of the global south, because the grievances of the global south is coming out because of the situation in Gaza or the situation of the Palestinian. I think the Israeli government and policymakers might want to reorient their position and their policy. As much as the West is powerful and the West is in strong support of the position or the activities of Israel, the grievances of the global south goes a long way. And the situation in the Middle East, in Gaza, will continue to be a problem for the West, and in this case to a greater extent the United States, which could also lead to blowback in the United States, Americans and Western citizens against Israel, or Western government against Israel, because it is putting the West in a very complicated position with and among itself and also with the rest of the world. So once again, as I've said, the situation in Gaza in the long term could be problematic for the United States, the West, and for Israel. Because even in the United States and the West, we can argue that both parties, okay, let's say in the United States, the Democrats and the Republicans, and basically the American government, or to a greater extent, all the governments of the West are in strong support of Israel. Now, the situation in Gaza needs to end as soon as possible. The longer it continues, the more destructions of things, properties, okay, infrastructure, and the loss of lives that we are going to see. We are at the point where the truth is that in the West, as much as the various governments and political parties are in support of Israel, we can also argue that to a greater extent in the United States, the right of the political spectrum, most especially led by the Christian right, especially those who believe in the whole idea of Armageddon and building the temple or whatsoever so that Jesus can come back. As much as they are in strong support of Israel, there are members of the right, and those guys hold a very dangerous position in terms of how they see people of color. And they do not hold strongly to the whole idea of Armageddon and the biblical prediction that the Christian right does hold. And those members of the right were those same people who, I think it was in 2012 in Charlottesville, that basically marched with torches and saying some things which I'm not going to repeat. The situation in the Middle East, in Gaza, it is forcing the United States to continue to boldly, explicitly, and overtly support Israel, which the United States is Israel's allies anyway, and will be in strong support of Israel. But it is beginning to make it seem, or it is putting the United States in a position where it seems as if the United States doesn't have control of its own foreign policy, or as if the United States government is weak and incompetent and doesn't pay regards to its own people. When the situation in the Middle East backfires in the future and hit the United States and the West, we could begin to see the radical members of these societies, especially those of the right, begin to point finger at Israel. I don't know what you think, but I do feel that as a global community, we need to take these things seriously. And those members of the government of Israel and the United States and the West, who are making these decisions that are leading to the situation in the Middle East, the situation in Ukraine, the potential situation in East Asia, need to think this thoroughly, and they need to be very careful. Because honestly, I do believe that the future of mankind is going to be very bleak. It is going to be scary. Even in the United States, where we are seeing the economy is taking a blow. I remember recently there was a police officer that was talking to black people, people of color, and other minority groups, and the poor as people who need to be warehoused. So warehousing people, that is the idea of putting them in jail, in concentration camps. Usually when you do that, you start destroying them. So there are members of these societies in the United States and the West with terrible perspective about things, about nature, about human beings, about other people, especially those who are members of the global South. The situation in the Middle East could lead to backfiring of radicalism of an epic proportion, whether we are talking about in the West or in the Middle East. And I'm not sure what the objectives of the West, the United States, or Israel are on the situation in Gaza, in the Middle East. But this thing needs to be ended as soon as possible. Now, in Gaza, so far it is said that about or nearly 40,000 people have died. And just in the past 2 days, you have a strike killing 21 people. The last time I checked, there was a strike that killed about 38 people. And also there are sources out there that one family lost about 18 members. And I've heard this in the past before. So this is becoming very dangerous for the world, for the Middle East, for Gaza, and for Israel. Now, in terms of Gaza, you having the young man whose name is Mohammed Abuel-Qomasan, who basically lost both twin babies, his wife, who basically delivered the babies through cesarean section, and the maternal grandmother. Such sentiment does lead to the will of a person to want payback. And this is one of the reasons why I continue to stress that the situation in the Middle East must end as soon as possible. So once again, the experience or the fate of Mr. Mohammed Abuel-Qomasan is shaping to look like the headline story of what is happening in Gaza, or of the grievance, or one of the grievances of the global South against the West, the conceptual West, the white West. And the situation in Gaza, it is actually looking, or it is shaping to look, to feel as if it is a contest, a divide, a war of the West against the rest, the West against the global South, and dangerously so. Israel is shaping to look like it is removed from the global South. It is shaping to look like it is the West, which in the long term, I do think it's not going to work for Israel in terms of its reputation and in terms of its collaboration or re-entering into the community of nations, especially the global South. Because the situation in Gaza, it is actually shaping, or at least it is beginning to look or feel as if it is the experience in terms of its similarity of the global South, the result of the aggression of the West, the conceptual West, when Western countries went around the world and doing whatever they want and basically causing death and destruction to people around the world. Now, for the questions, the whole idea of this war is saying a lot about the West. And as I've said, it makes the West look like a hypocrite. Okay, the West look like a hypocrite. And the West looks like it doesn't care, or it doesn't actually believe in the whole idea of freedom, justice, equality, acceptance, fairness that it often preaches to the rest of the world. And to a greater extent, the Western grievance against Russia in Ukraine, or Russian actions in Ukraine, beginning to look senseless, hypocritical, unfair, and just flat out nonsense. Because not only you are not trying to end, or it appears as if the West is not trying to end the situation in the Middle East, in Gaza, to an extent, to people around the world. They are looking at the West as an enabler. And they're also looking at the West as the entity, the culprit, that is actually funding the continuation of the situation in Ukraine. And is also preparing to go after China. So what is happening is going to also damage the West very significantly. Now, in terms of Western apologies to the rest of the world and to Africa for its aggression, not only it is interesting, but I have asked question before. Why now? You had hundreds of years and over 60 years since decolonization, quote unquote, to apologize, but you've done nothing. The West is not doing it because of what's happening in Ukraine and the fact that Africa is pulling itself away and it is beginning to turn to Russia and to the East. Now the West wants to apologize. And the situation that is happening in the world is also taking shape, okay, or it is impacting the United Nations. Recently, there was a spat between Africa and the West, okay, or Africans making their grievances heard. The whole idea that the West has a dominant power, a veto power, seats in the UN Security Council, and Africa has none. Honestly, I think it is nonsense. I think it is time that Africa stop complaining. Enforce yourself, your will in the United Nations, or leave. And I think Africans and the rest of the world must leave the United Nations. I think the global order must be completely dealt with, okay? Done away with. Every country in the world must exit international relations and renegotiating their re-entry into international relations, okay? Or into the global policies, the global contracts or treaties. Because the West is becoming, or is appearing boldly, explicitly, overtly to be a hypocrite. So as a result, the rest of the world must exit all international agreement and renegotiate their entry into it. And there are those who would dare argue that doing so will hurt the global South or the rest of the world. But I do think it is also going to hurt the West in terms of Western prestige and in terms of other things that the West could lose as a result of a broken, disintegrated international relations, disintegrated international agreement, global cooperation. And I do believe many will see what I'm just saying to be too radical or nonsense. But if fairness must be fair, then the West must act fairly to the rest of the world. The West continuously disrespects the rest of the world, and the rest of the world must hold the West accountable for that, for its action. So, in terms of the situation in the Middle East, in Gaza, it basically, once again, I'm going to repeat, it demonstrates the divide in global politics. And it basically teaches us that prestige, might, and power makes the difference. All the nonsense about equality, peace, prosperity, unity, togetherness is just nonsense that the West continues to preach. Now, my friends, I'm going to end here by repeating two questions, and I hope to hear from you. I hope to hear what you think. The first one, does the continuation of the war in Gaza help or save Israel, Gaza, Gazans, or the West? How and why? Number two, is the West ready and willing to accept the consequences of the war in Gaza, long-term or short-term consequences? Or will the West do the obvious, repeat the obvious, basically privatizing the glory of the misdeeds in Gaza and the rest of the world, while at the same time socializing and globalizing the consequences of their actions? I'm going to repeat. Number two, is the West willing to accept the consequences of its action or actions in Gaza? Or will the West repeat the obvious, basically privatizing the glory of their misdeeds or of its misdeeds in Gaza, while at the same time socializing and globalizing the devastating consequences of its misdeeds in Gaza? Now, my friends, I hope to hear what you think, and please tell me what you think. But I want to thank you very much for being a member of the Echoing Voice community. And thank you once again for the many times for watching the Echoing Voice. Peace.